What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors faces off with a host who thinks he can intimidate anyone? And how far is the line between a provocative interview and a personal attack disguised as entertainment? It was supposed to be just another night on Jimmy Kimmel Live. In Los Angeles, the cameras were rolling, the crowd was buzzing, and the bright lights lit up center stage. Michael B. Jordan, 36, entered with the confidence of a man who owns his space, elegant, calm, and ready to promote his new film. Opposite him stood Jimmy Kimmel, 56, a seasoned host known for his sharp, unpredictable humor. The stage was set for a light-hearted conversation, full of clever jokes and behind-the-scenes Hollywood stories. But something that night veered off course. Within minutes, the atmosphere began to shift. The audience, initially cheerful, started to sense the tension growing. Jimmy tossed the script aside and decided to go with his gut, a gut that led him straight into personal territory. What followed wasn't an interview, but a clash of postures, egos, and boundaries. A confrontation no one expected to witness live, yet one that left an indelible mark on the show's history. If you think you've seen celebrities grilled on TV before, wait until you see how Michael B. Jordan responded. This wasn't just television, it was a wake-up call. How far can someone go before crossing the line of respect? What initially seemed like a slight breach of protocol quickly became something much more serious. As soon as the formalities ended, Jimmy Kimmel dropped any hint of subtlety and went straight for Michael B. Jordan's personal life. With a forced smile and a near-casual tone, he asked about rumors involving past relationships and backstage gossip. The audience let out a nervous chuckle, unsure whether it was part of a badly delivered joke or the beginning of something more uncomfortable. Michael, ever the professional, kept his composure. He took a breath, looked Jimmy in the eye and firmly said, "Jimmy, I'm here to talk about my film. Let's focus on that." The response was graceful, but made it clear that the actor wasn't playing along with a game of humiliation disguised as humor. Jimmy, however, didn't back down. Perhaps believing he was creating an iconic live TV moment, he pressed on, provocatively asking, "Don't you think the audience deserves the truth?" This was no longer entertainment. It was provocation on national television. The tension was palpable. The audience, moments earlier clapping enthusiastically, was now divided between discomfort and anticipation. Some laughed awkwardly. Others simply watched in silence. Michael remained composed, but his expression turned serious, a silent warning that patience has limits. Why do certain hosts believe they can cross any boundary as long as they do it with a smile? That question lingered in the air as the mood in the studio continued to shift. What came next would not be just a war of words. It would be a turning point. A collision between respect and arrogance that would leave lasting marks on both sides of the stage. And you? How far do you think an interview can go before it becomes an attack? The tension in the studio didn't subside. It escalated with every word. Jimmy, realizing that Michael wouldn't give in to personal questions, changed tactics. But instead of easing off, he tightened the screws, now targeting the actor's career. With a crooked smile he asked, "You only play heroes and dramas. When are you going to take a risk? Something relevant." The comment sounded less like a question and more like a dig. The audience murmured. A few chuckled, but the discomfort was obvious. Michael, unshaken, lifted his gaze and replied firmly, "Hard work isn't a lack of versatility, Jimmy. It's dedication. Every role I take has a purpose." It was a calm but weighty answer. Jimmy, perhaps realizing he was up against someone who wouldn't buckle to ridicule, began interrupting with insinuations and sarcasm. Remarks about Michael's choice of roles, his public image, his supposed lack of artistic risk. Everything became ammunition to try to tear him down on camera. But Michael didn't flinch. His unwavering stance began to shift the room. The audience, once passive, began offering subtle applause after each firm answer. It was a silent yet intense battle. Two men at center stage, fighting not just for attention but for respect. And the more Jimmy tried to push Michael into a corner, the more the actor made it clear that intimidation had no place here. The studio was split. On one side, uncomfortable laughter. On the other, focused eyes and growing support for Michael. The question now was, how much longer would Jimmy keep playing this game before he completely lost control? The atmosphere hit a boiling point when Jimmy Kimmel, visibly frustrated by Michael B. Jordan's calm defiance, began to lose his own composure. The crowd was no longer reacting with the same enthusiasm. Now there was a thick silence, as if everyone was holding their breath. Michael, still calm and articulate, gestured that he was ready to end the interview. He slowly stood, adjusted his jacket, and said with quiet resolve, "I think this has gone far enough, Jimmy. Good luck with the show." At that moment, in a gesture as unexpected as it was unacceptable, Jimmy reached out and grabbed Michael's forearm, as if trying to stop him from leaving. It lasted a second, maybe two, but it was enough to freeze everyone in the studio. Michael looked down at Jimmy's hand gripping his arm, then raised his eyes with an icy, controlled expression, as if measuring every word before speaking. "Take your hand off me. Now." The sentence cut through the silence like a blade. Jimmy, realizing his mistake, let go immediately and stepped back, but the damage was done. The line had been crossed, and it was no longer about provocative questions or bad jokes. This was about physical respect. About boundaries no host or human should cross on national television or anywhere else. The audience, stunned, watched the moment in absolute silence. There were no more laughs, no more spectacle, only the raw discomfort of a situation that had spiraled completely out of control. Jimmy tried to regain his composure, but it was clear he had lost command. Michael, still standing, didn't need to raise his voice. His presence was louder than any shout. The question was no longer who won the verbal exchange. It was, what happens when a star decides not to stay silent in the face of humiliation? The entire studio was silent. Jimmy Kimmel, pale, tried to compose himself, but there was no longer any shield to protect him. Not sarcasm, not easy laughter, not even the live show's editing. Michael B. Jordan, still standing, looked directly at the host and, with a firm and deliberate voice, began to dismantle him with words that struck deep. "You're not funny, Jimmy. You're cruel." The audience froze, as if witnessing something sacred and irreversible. "Your show only exists because it humiliates people better than you. You laugh at others' discomfort like it's entertainment." Jimmy tried to respond with a timid joke, something about humor being subjective, but his voice failed. Michael didn't back down. "You want to talk about relevance? Your greatest legacy will be tonight. The night the world saw who you really are." Those words didn't come from a place of hate, but from truth. And that's what made them so devastating. It was as if Michael had torn off the mask of the live broadcast, revealing what many had already suspected, that behind the facade of humor, there was cynicism and a bruised ego, angry at no longer controlling the narrative. The audience, still in shock, began to respond with timid applause, not for the spectacle, but out of respect. Jimmy had nowhere left to hide. And you? Have you ever witnessed a moment when truth spoke louder than any script? Have you ever seen someone stand up, live, against a system that feeds on public humiliation? This was the climax no one expected. Not a scandal but a reckoning. And the stage of Jimmy Kimmel Live would never be the same again. Because that night Michael B. Jordan didn't just defend his name. He gave a lesson to the entire world. The silence after Michael B. Jordan's words hung over the studio like a heavy curtain. Jimmy Kimmel, visibly shaken, tried to maintain a nervous smile, but there was no audience left to entertain, neither in the studio nor at home. The energy had completely shifted. Michael, with the calm of someone who knows exactly how heavy the moment is, turned to the crowd. He looked into the surprised faces, some still struggling to believe what they had just witnessed, and said with conviction, "Thank you to those who still value real art. This isn't just about fame or headlines. It's about respect." With those words, he walked off the stage, each step accompanied by a reverent silence. There were no cheers, no exaggerated celebrations. It was a moment of pure impact, a conclusion worthy of a courageous act. Jimmy remained seated, motionless for a few seconds, trying to find the words to regain control. His voice finally came out, weak and trembling. "We'll be right back." But the show never came back. Behind the scenes, producers rushed around, scrambling to decide how to deal with what had just happened. The broadcast cut to commercials, but the public already knew that night's show wasn't going to continue. And maybe it never would in the same way again. The image of Jimmy, alone under the stage lights, said more than any joke he might try to make. Online, the videos began to spread. What was supposed to be a simple promotional interview became a milestone. And the silence Michael left behind as he exited, firm, dignified, unquestionable, was more eloquent than any rehearsed line. Because sometimes the loudest response doesn't come in shouts, but in the decision to simply walk away with the truth on your side. The screen went black, and the silence after the commercial was final. Jimmy Kimmel Live did not return that night. The broadcast ended abruptly, and in the hours that followed, social media exploded. Clips of the confrontation spread with incredible speed. Hashtags like #MichaelSpeaks, #KimmelExposed, and #RespectFirst took over the trending topics worldwide. For many, that moment wasn't just a TV clash. It was a symbol. Turning point. A narrator's voice fades in, as slow-motion black-and-white footage from the interview plays. That night, on one of the most watched stages in America, Michael B. Jordan reminded the world that respect is not optional. That talent, integrity, and composure do not bend to sensationalism. And that no matter how famous a host is, there are limits that should never be crossed. The images show Michael standing up, Jimmy trying to stop him from leaving, and the deathly silence of the audience. One by one, viewers who once laughed became witnesses to something far bigger. The raw exposure of a power imbalance on live television. Jimmy Kimmel learned, in the most direct way possible, that when you play with fire, someone always gets burned. And this time, it wasn't the guest. In the days that followed, the show went off air. Jimmy's team issued a formal statement, but the damage was done. Meanwhile, Michael B. Jordan continued promoting his film, now publicly recognized in a new role, that of a man who stood tall against a system that had long profited from humiliation. Because in the end, it wasn't about winning an argument, it was about proving that dignity is not up for negotiation. And those who saw it won't forget it. And what if I told you this story was just the beginning of a turning point? That maybe, after that night, many hosts will think twice before confusing humor with humiliation. Michael B. Jordan didn't just defend his career. He stood for a principle. And you just witnessed one of the most intense moments in modern television. If you made it this far, it's because stories like this deserve to be told, discussed, and shared. So now it's your turn. Did you like the video? Leave a like. It tells us it's worth continuing to bring content that provokes, moves, and makes people think. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell. There's much more coming. And of course, send this video to that one friend who still thinks it's just a little joke, or celebrities should take it. Spoiler alert. They shouldn't. Sharing gives voice to this kind of stance. Turns a moment into a message. Because in the end, silence means consent. But standing up, that inspires. See you in the next video. And until then, remember, respect never goes out of style. Never.